At 2:17 a.m., the world was quiet, and Daniel Harper believed he was safe. He was a man who lived by the numbers, a man who found comfort in the predictability of a spreadsheet and the certainty of a schedule. Driving home on that empty stretch of Arizona asphalt, he felt the heavy, satisfying exhaustion of a man who was doing everything right. The dashboard of his SUV glowed with a soft, digital blue, telling him that his fuel efficiency was optimal, his speed was legal, and his engine temperature was stable. He had a credit score of 720, a 5-year financial plan, and a belief that the system rewarded those who followed the rules. Daniel adjusted his grip on the leather steering wheel, a tactile reminder of the $62,000 asset that surrounded him. He didn't know that in exactly 47 minutes, he would be financially ruined. He didn't know that the numbers he trusted so implicitly were about to turn against him with a violence he couldn't comprehend. By 9:04 a.m. the next morning, Daniel would owe $87,000 to a bank that viewed him as nothing more than a delinquent account number. He would no longer own a car. There would be no warning from the universe, no second chance to rethink a decision made weeks prior, and absolutely no appeal process. Just one single decision, made in under 2 minutes on a tired Tuesday night, that was about to erase a decade of hard work. This is not a story about a reckless gambler who bet the house on a losing horse. It is not a story about greed or illegal activity. It is a terrifying case study on how doing everything legally, and technically correctly, can still completely destroy you. To understand the magnitude of the tragedy, you have to understand the man himself. Daniel Harper was not the type of guy who took risks, he didn't bet on sports, he didn't buy cryptocurrency, and he drove exactly the speed limit. He was 32 years old, living in a modest apartment complex near the freeway in Phoenix, where the rent was reasonable and the neighbors kept to themselves. He worked as a warehouse shift supervisor, a job that required him to be on his feet for 10 hours a day on unforgiving concrete floors. It wasn't a glamorous life, and his back hurt most days before he even clocked out, but it was stable. In Daniel's world, stability was the only currency that mattered. But in this economy, the definition of stable kept moving further and further out of reach. Rent was rising every lease renewal, groceries cost 20% more than they did 2 years ago, and his paycheck remained stubbornly flat. So Daniel did what millions of hardworking people do: he hustled. At night, while the rest of the city slept, he traded his sleep for security by driving for Uber. He tracked every penny he earned and spent, paying his bills the day they arrived in his mailbox. He checked his credit score more often than most people check their social media feeds, watching the number tick up point by point. He wasn't chasing a luxury lifestyle or a mansion in the hills. He was chasing the simple peace of mind that comes from knowing you can handle an emergency. And that is why the car meant so much more to him than just metal and rubber. For years, Daniel had driven what people politely call beaters. These were cars that rattled ominously when you hit 60 miles per hour and had air conditioning that only seemed to work in December. They were vehicles with check engine lights that glowed like permanent Christmas decorations, constantly demanding repairs he couldn't afford. But Daniel had worked hard, saved his down payment, and built his credit. So when he walked into the dealership that Saturday morning, he did so with his head held high. The showroom was bright and sterile, smelling of floor polish and new rubber, a scent that smells like opportunity to some and debt to others. The SUV he chose wasn't a luxury vehicle, but to Daniel, sitting in that driver's seat felt like piloting a spaceship. It was clean, it was reliable, and it was the tool that would allow him to drive more Uber hours, earn the higher tier fares, and finally build a savings cushion. The finance manager, a man with a practiced smile and a heavy gold watch, slid a piece of paper across the desk. "You're approved," he said, the magic words Daniel had waited years to hear. The loan amount was $62,000. The interest rate was high, sitting at 11%. A reflection of the volatile market rather than Daniel's reliability. The monthly payment came out to $742. It was a heavy number, one that made Daniel's stomach tighten for a moment. But he did the mental math, justifying the cost as an investment in his future earning potential. This wasn't a toy, It was an asset, a business expense, a stepping stone to a better life. Or so he told himself. The bank had only one requirement before he could take the keys and drive off the lot. He needed full insurance coverage to satisfy the loan terms initially. And that is the precise moment where Daniel's life quietly went off the rails. It was late that night when he finally got home, exhausted from the stress of the negotiation and the thrill of the purchase. He sat at his kitchen table, the glow of his laptop screen illuminating his tired face as he searched for insurance. The quotes flooded his screen, number after number that seemed impossibly high. $200 a month. $180. $150. Terms like collision, comprehensive, and gap insurance floated around the screen like a foreign language he didn't have the energy to translate. To a tired mind, they didn't look like essential protections. They looked like upsells, like the extended warranty on a toaster that you never actually need. Then, he saw it. The golden ticket at the bottom of the list. $39 a month. The last day. The website used comforting, safe language designed to make you feel smart for choosing it. Meets state requirements. Essential coverage. Front. Instant proof of insurance. Daniel didn't scroll down to read the exclusions or the fine print. He didn't call an agent to ask, "What happens if I hit a wall?" or "What happens if someone hits me?" Why would he? The law requires insurance to drive, and this policy was sold as insurance. Therefore, in his mind, buying this policy was a responsible act. He clicked the Buy Now button, listened to the whir of his printer as it produced his temporary card, and told himself he had beaten the system. He even bragged to a friend later that week that he had found car insurance cheaper than his Netflix subscription. They both laughed at his cleverness. But the policy wasn't laughing. It was waiting in the glove box like a dormant virus. For 3 weeks, the universe played along with the illusion. Daniel drove to the warehouse every morning, feeling proud of his new ride. He picked up airport runs for Uber in the evenings, receiving 5-star ratings for the cleanliness and comfort of his vehicle. He paid his high car note on time, feeling the pinch but knowing he was building equity. The insurance card sat quietly in his glove box, tucked inside the crisp owner's manual, a silent talisman of safety. He felt protected, and he felt like an adult who had his affairs in order. But he had made a critical error in understanding how the insurance industry works. He thought insurance was there to protect him, the customer paying the premiums. He didn't realize that liability only means exactly what it says. It protects everyone else from you, but leaves you completely naked. It happened on a Tuesday, just after midnight, the time when luck tends to run out. Daniel had dropped off his last passenger and was 5 miles from home. He was thinking about bed, about the silence of his apartment, and about the sandwich waiting in his fridge. The intersection was quiet, the streetlights humming overhead, and the traffic light was a solid, reassuring green. Daniel proceeded into the intersection with the confidence of someone who has the right of way. The impact came from nowhere. A lifted pickup truck ran the red light at 50 miles per hour, hitting Daniel's SUV squarely on the driver's side. Physics took over instantly, violent and uncaring. Metal screamed as it tore apart, a sound so loud it felt like it ripped the air itself. The SUV spun across 3 lanes of traffic, tires screeching, before slamming into the concrete barrier. The airbags detonated like gunshots, punching Daniel in the chest and filling the cabin with white powder and acrid smoke. As Daniel sat there, coughing, bleeding from the shattered glass, watching steam rise from his crushed hood, a single thought comforted him through the pain. "Thank God," he thought, closing his eyes against the spinning world. "Thank God I have insurance." Daniel woke up in the trauma unit of the local hospital, and he had bruised ribs, a mild concussion, and lacerations from the side window that had exploded inward. The doctor told him he was lucky to be alive, that the side impact airbags had saved him from severe traumas. The police report came next, delivered by an officer who looked tired and sympathetic. The SUV was a total loss. The frame was bent beyond repair, the engine block was cracked, and the suspension was disintegrated. It was no longer a $62,000 asset. It was a pile of scrap metal worth its weight in steel. And then came the news about the other driver, Dan. The man who ran the red light had no insurance. He had no valid driver's license. He had no assets to sue for, no savings, nothing but a beat-up truck that was now also destroyed. But Daniel wasn't panicked yet. This is exactly why you pay premiums every month. This is why you have the card in the glove box and the app on your phone. He thought the system was designed to catch him when he fell. He didn't know he was already in freefall, and there was no net at the bottom. 3 days later, after the adrenaline had worn off and the deep, bruising pain had set in, Daniel sat at his kitchen table. He dialed the claims number on the back of his insurance card, ready to start the process of getting his replacement vehicle. The representative was polite, professional, and completely detached. "Mr. Harper," she said, her voice filtered through the tinny speaker of his phone, "I'm looking at your policy now. It appears you selected liability-only coverage," she continued, her tone flat. Daniel frowned, the pain medication making his head swim slightly. "Yes," he said, "but my car is totaled. It wasn't my fault. Where do I send the tow yard info?" There was a pause on the line, a silence that lasted 5 seconds but felt like 5 years. "I'm sorry, sir," she said. "Since you declined collision and comprehensive coverage, and you specifically declined the uninsured motorist add-on, we cannot assist with the damage to your vehicle." Daniel felt the room temperature drop 10 degrees. "So," he stammered, his voice trembling, "you're not paying for the car?" "No, sir," she replied. "We are closing the file." The line went dead, and in that silence, Daniel heard the sound of his life breaking apart. The math didn't care about his feelings, and it didn't care that the accident wasn't his fault. The reality arrived in pieces, hitting him like a slow-motion avalanche. First, the lender called. The bank didn't want the wrecked car back. It was useless to them. They wanted the money. The loan balance was still $62,000, and the contract Daniel signed obligated him to pay it regardless of the vehicle's condition. Next, the hospital bills arrived. Even with his health insurance, the deductibles, the ambulance fees, and the trauma unit costs hit him hard. That was $9,000 he didn't have. Then came the realization about his income. Without a car, he couldn't drive for Uber. That was $2,000 a month in income, vanished instantly. Over the next few months of recovery, that would be $6,000 in lost wages there. Then came the towing fees and the daily storage fees from the impound lot, which accumulated while he argued with the insurance company. Personal items destroyed in the crash. His phone, his sunglasses, his work boots, added to the tally. When he sat down and added it all up, the number stared back at him in black ink. $87,000. He owed a fortune that would take decades to pay off. And in his driveway, there was nothing but an empty parking spot with an oil stain. Daniel dug the policy documents out of his trash folder in his email. He read them again, desperate for a loophole, a clause, anything that could save him. But it was all there, written in plain, legal English. The cheapest insurance had done exactly what it promised to do. It kept him legal to drive on state roads. It protected the other guy if Daniel had been at fault. But it never promised to protect Daniel from his own bad luck, or the negligence of others. He realized then that full coverage isn't just a marketing term used to get you to spend more money. It is the difference between having a bad Tuesday and having a bankrupt life. He tried to reason with the bank, calling the loan department and pleading his case. He explained about the uninsured driver, about the hospital bills, about the unfairness of it all. The loan officer was sympathetic, sounding genuinely sorry, but the algorithm that ran the bank was not. "Mr. Harper," the officer said, "you signed a contract to repay the loan regardless of the condition of the collateral." They suggested he refinance the loan to lower the payments. But you cannot refinance a pile of scrap metal sitting in a junkyard again. The asset didn't exist anymore. The debt, however, was immortal. The weeks that followed were a blur of humiliation and decline. At a house. The bills piled up on his counter like snowdrifts, white envelopes turning into red notices. The credit cards he had carefully managed were maxed out just to buy food and pay minimums. The calls from collections agents started coming at 8 a.m. sharp and didn't stop until dinner time. Daniel sold his furniture on Craigslist to make a car payment for a car he didn't have. He canceled every subscription, stopped eating out, and lived on ramen and anxiety. He eventually had to break his lease and move out of his apartment, moving into a room half the size in a worse part of town. And the worst part was the ghost of the SUV. He was paying $742 a month for a car that was currently being crushed into a cube. That symbol of his freedom had become a shackle that followed him everywhere he went. 6 weeks after the crash, the insurance company sent one final automated email. Claim status: closed/denied. There was no appeal button. There was no manager to speak to. The case was closed. Daniel stared at the screen, his eyes burning. He thought about the night he bought the policy. He thought about that bright green button on the website. $39 a month. He had tried to save about $100 a month on premiums. That specific decision to save $100 had cost him $87,000. Daniel doesn't drive anymore. Not because he doesn't want to, but because he literally can't. His credit score is ruined, hovering in the low 500s. His savings are gone. He takes the bus to the warehouse now, adding 2 hours to his commute every single day. He did everything society told him to do. He worked hard at a difficult job. He bought the reliable car to secure his future. He got the insurance required by law. But he missed the most important lesson of modern finance. Being cheap is often the most expensive thing you can be. And being covered by the letter of the law isn't the same as being protected from reality. Cheap insurance feels like a victory when you pay the low premium. But remember Daniel's story the next time you see a quote that looks too good to be true. Sometimes, that low monthly payment isn't a savings at all. Sometimes, it's just permission to lose everything you have ever worked for. Don't let your life become a cautionary tale for others to learn from. Check your policy today. Read the fine print. Because the road doesn't care if you're a good person. And neither does the bank.